Welcome to Our Weird World. I'm your host, John Henson, and this week will not be as long of an episode as last week, I can promise you that. But it's a new month, which means it is time for another edition of the Weird Fun Bag. This is number 8. As always, 3 stories, looking at the stories of the Citizens Commission to investigate the FBI, the Collyer Brothers, and then our first story after the jump is of the USS Sultana. The Sultana, I said USS, it's not, it's just the Sultana because it wasn't like a military ship or anything like that. But the Sultana was a 260-foot long, 42-foot wide steamship that carried passengers and freight, mostly cotton, along the Mississippi River between St. Louis and New Orleans back in the 1800s, mid-1800s. The ship was launched on January 3rd, 1863. During the Civil War, which is crazy to me. Like, I don't know if this happens to anybody else, but like anytime growing up, like that we were talking about war, I just thought that was the only thing happening, right? Like whenever there was a war going on, I thought that everybody just stopped doing everything else and just everyone was fighting. And that's not really the case. Like, since I've become an adult, just like war happens. And like, this is probably sounds pretty ignorant coming from me living in a place where like war doesn't actively happen. Like it's always happening somewhere else. But even just observing how things go in other countries, like, yeah, there's war going on, but like not everybody's always fighting. Like there's a spot where a fight takes place and then things change or stay the same based on the outcome of that fight. So I don't know, to me, especially with like the Civil War, where it seemed like everyone was fighting everyone, like, no, like life was still going on. And there were places in the country where fighting wasn't happening and they were still creating ships and launching them. And so this Sultana, like I said, launched on January 3rd, 1863. It was constructed with 4 tubular boilers, which generated twice as much steam on a single fuel load as conventional flue boilers. And if there's one thing I know about my audience, it's that they know the intricate specs of 1860s steamship engineering. And so surely you all know that, of course, 4 tubular boilers would be much more fuel efficient than a conventional flue boiler, obviously, right? Anyway, despite the increase in speed from these extra boilers, the ship had to be constantly maintained because, as I'm sure you are all aware, the areas between each flue would become easily clogged with heavy sediment and materials that were then difficult to scrape off. Obviously, it's a common flaw in the design of the tubular boiler. We all know this. Even more, the slightest dip in water levels in the boiler would create hot spots that could ultimately lead to the boiler actually exploding. But beyond that, the entire ship was made with layers of highly flammable wood that was covered in even more flammable varnish. And so surely you can see where this story is going to go. So on April 13th, 1865, Captain James Cass Mason left St. Louis on the Sultana bound for New Orleans. 2 days later, while they were stopped at Cairo, Illinois, which is that point where the Ohio and Mississippi rivers meet, Mason received word that President Abraham Lincoln had been assassinated. And so while he's out around town, he grabs as many newspapers as he could to spread the news around the ship, since the Civil War had basically crippled the South's lines of communication. And so word already traveled pretty slow in the 1800s. It was even slower during the Civil War. But when the Sultana arrived in Vicksburg, Mississippi, Captain Mason was approached by Captain Reuben Hatch, who told him that thousands of recently released Union prisoners of war had been brought to a nearby camp to be sent back north. Captain Hatch also said that the government was ready to pay $2.75 for every enlisted soldier and $8 for every officer to any shipmaster or transporter who could take these soldiers back up north. And Captain Mason, he needed this money. It's a good payout. He also knew that there was room to take about 1,400 people back up north on the Sultana, and so he accepted Hatch's offer. So Mason finished carrying his cargo and his passengers down to New Orleans, and then quickly turned around, went back upstream to Vicksburg to pick up the soldiers on April 21st. Mason originally left New Orleans with 70 passengers, a few head of livestock, and a crew of 85. However, once when the Sultana was about 10 hours away from Vicksburg, one of the boilers sprang a leak, and Mason was forced to reduce the boat's speed until he could get to Vicksburg for repairs. So he finally gets there. Things seem okay. Mason is getting as many prisoners as he can to board the ship. Meanwhile, a mechanic boarded the Sultana to repair the leak. The mechanic initially requested to cut and just replace the ruptured seam, which would have taken a few days to repair. Mason, however, did not want to wait that long and just convinced the mechanic to rivet a thinner patch over the seam as a temporary fix, and then he could get it fully repaired back in St. Louis. Thanks to some poor communication from Captain Hatch, which turned out to work out in Mason's favor, the Sultana actually left Vicksburg with over 2,100 people instead of the originally promised 1,400, and which was way more even than the ship's legal capacity of 376. So there's over almost 6 times more people on the Sultana going from Vicksburg to St. Louis than was legally allowed. But Mason, he's getting a big payday out of this. He doesn't care. So for the next 2 days, the Sultana traveled up the river, which was in the middle of its annual spring flood. And this one was particularly bad because in some places the Mississippi River was so swollen that it was 3 miles wide in places. And the Mississippi River is a huge river. It's not 3 miles wide, huge. Like that's getting into like coastal estuary river territory. Like I know like on the Outer Banks, especially once you get like closer to the Sounds and some of those where the river is just so like that's how big that we're getting, not farther up into like Mississippi and Arkansas. And Kitty's got poop zoomies now, and now he's clawing at the recliner. No, Kitty, no, it's a bad kitty. Don't do that. You have a whole tree. Stop clawing my stop claw, stop it. Anyway, The river's really wide at this point. It was also so high that only the tops of the trees on the original banks of the river were visible. So like, not only is the river flooding, but then now you've got, probably 20, 30, 40 foot tall trees that are completely, almost entirely submerged. So this was an insane flood going on right now. But on April 26th, the Sultana arrived in Memphis and unloaded 120 tons of sugar and roughly 200 of the passengers. After grabbing a new load of coal for the boilers, the ship then continued its journey north. But less than an hour later, 3 boilers on the Sultana unexpectedly exploded. And I say unexpectedly very loosely because you knew this was going to happen. Because the ship was so overloaded, each time it kind of listed from side to side, water would rush out of the highest boiler, which would create those hot spots that I mentioned earlier that would lead to this sort of thing happening. This was especially problematic when the boat listed in the opposite direction and the water then returned and quickly was converted from water to steam, which created a ton of pressure, right? Because obviously we know this as 1860s steamship scientists and engineers. You can't drain all the water from the boiler so it gets super hot and then immediately fill it all back up, because it's going to create a bunch of steam, and then steam creates pressure, and then things explode. Although the official investigation listed that sort of scenario as the cause of the explosion, a St. Louis man named William Streeter claimed that he had himself sabotaged the Sultana with a coal torpedo, which I don't even know what that is. However, since the explosion occurred at the top rather than at the bottom of the boat where a torpedo could be found, most people think that Streeter was just a crazy person and that the official cause was that the boiler actually exploded because of overpressurization. Regardless of what happened, though, this is how big this explosion was. The blast tore through the crowded decks of the ship and obliterated the pilot house. Passengers were launched into the river. One of the smokestacks toppled onto the front part of the boat. The bow, maybe? I don't know. Which was still full of people, and then crashed down into the middle deck, which trapped and killed the people down inside the ship. At the back, the stern, I guess? I don't know. No, whatever. The decks collapsed into a slope that then exposed the furnace boxes, which caught fire and then turned what was left of the Sultana into a floating inferno. Soldiers, all of the Union soldiers who were on board, who were weak and just frail from their time as, war prisoners, tried clinging to each other for safety, but most of them just ended up drowning each other in the river. Because also, I don't know if you've ever been to the Mississippi River. That thing flows fast, right? Like I've seen the river in New Orleans, Baton Rouge, Memphis, St. Louis, and every time I've seen it, like the current is just crazy fast. Even along the edges, it's got to be even faster in the middle. And so just you get into that water and it's gross, brown, nasty water anyway, and you're gone. You're a goner. 30 minutes later, a passing steamship came across the debris from the explosion and tried to start rescuing people who had survived. But by then, others had drifted back down the river and were actually passing through the city of Memphis, yelling for help as other steamboats and old warships jumped out into the river to try to perform more rescues. What was left of the Sultana eventually drifted downstream and finally sank 7 hours later near present-day Marion, Arkansas. The exact death toll from this explosion has never truly been determined, but the range is anywhere from 1,100 to 1,500 people. And so, because remember, there's over 2,000 people on this steamship to begin with, and 2/3 of them died, probably. Is that the math? Maybe closer, half to 75% died. That's the math. Bodies from the explosion were actually recovered as far south as Vicksburg back in Mississippi. And most of the Sultana's officers, including Captain Mason, who caused all of this to begin with, died in the explosion. And to this day, it is the worst maritime disaster in United States history. Our next story here is of Homer and Langley Collyer, who were born to a gynecologist and his first cousin in Harlem, New York. So already off to a good start. Incest, not just for the South. The two had a shockingly normal childhood and went on to attend Columbia University. Homer earned his degree in admiralty law, whatever that is, and Langley earned a degree in engineering and chemistry. Even more, Langley spent time as a concert pianist, even performing at Carnegie Hall for a time. Homer worked as a layman of Trinity Church, where generations of the Collyer family had been attending since 1697. And this story is taking place in the 1940s. So the Collyers had been in New York for a long time, well-established family, obviously doing very well. They're very wealthy. So why are they in this story? Well, in 1919, the Collyers' parents separated and the boys chose to remain with their mother in Harlem. 4 years later, their father died and left all of the family's possessions and wealth and legacy to the boys, who somehow found a way to move all of it into their mother's house. And it was a lot because it's a very wealthy family. They got a lot of stuff. Well, when their mother died in 1929, she also left all of her possessions to the boys, who decided to remain in the home, probably because the cost to move all of that crap that they had inherited out of the house was way too expensive. I don't know why they couldn't just sell it off, but I don't know, maybe it was sentimental. Well, for the next 4 years, the boys lived a normal life. Homer continued his law practice. Langley sold pianos. They each taught Sunday school at Trinity Church on Sunday mornings. But in 1933, Homer completely lost his vision due to hemorrhages in the back of his eyes. And Langley, being the caring brother that he was, quit his job and became a full-time caretaker for Homer. And then that's when all of this gets so weird. So around this time, the Great Depression hits and Harlem becomes the scene that you probably imagine when I first mentioned the city, because mostly you're kind of racist, but that's fine. But no, like an influx of black people came to the neighborhood. The overall niceness and quality went way downhill, not just because of black people, but the depression and just no one could afford anything and all of that. The Collyers, they were uncomfortable because black people made them uncomfortable, and they started to isolate themselves inside of their home. They stopped paying the mortgage. They had their phone and electricity lines shut off. And as rumors began to spread about these two hermits in Harlem, people started to get curious. After some neighborhood kids threw rocks at the house, Langley boarded the broken windows and then wired the doors shut. Several people then tried to rob the home based on rumors that the Collyers had all sorts of money and valuables inside the house, which probably wasn't completely false. And to combat this new problem, Langley basically turned their home into the house from Home Alone 2, which was pretty ingenious considering, like, obviously that movie hadn't been made yet, so how would he know what to do? But Langley spent more time than any sane person should basically rearranging all of the possessions and trash that he had gathered into mazes and tunnels throughout the house. He rigged tripwires, which were then connected to all kinds of traps designed to induce all kinds of slapstick comedic bits. He even created nests using all of the stuff that they had collected for he and his brother to live in. So hoarders to the extreme, also living inside a Home Alone death house. As Homer's health continued to deteriorate, Langley tried to keep caring for him by feeding him a diet consisting of black bread, peanut butter, and 100 oranges a week, because that was obviously better than any modern medicine at the time. Also, I have no idea what black bread is. Maybe it's like a pumpernickel or whatever you get at like Outback or something. I don't know. Anyway, Langley refused to take Homer to a doctor, using the logic that, like, because their father was a doctor and their father died early, and I guess in what may have been considered a preventable death, like, they just didn't trust the medical community. And so this paranoia clearly, and also remember, like, their father was a gynecologist, and I don't think that maybe Homer and Langley fully understood that. And maybe and I don't know, maybe their dad just told them like horror stories of just like everything he was seeing up inside the vagines that he was looking at on a daily basis. I don't know, but whatever their father instilled in them, they got super paranoid about the medical community. And for the next decade, Langley only left the home after midnight to go collect food and any other items he found along the way that piqued his interest. Despite efforts from various authorities to get the brothers to pay their bills and mortgage, as well as to just generally clean up the place, Langley always fought them off. And then finally, on March 21st, 1947, an anonymous person called the NYPD and insisted that there was a dead body inside the Collyers' home and that the smell of decomposition was radiating throughout the neighborhood. Even though police had received dozens of these calls on a regular basis up until this point, they finally decided to come out and check things out. When the police finally pried the door open, they were greeted with this massive wall of trash. It took 7 men to tear out this initial wall of junk, which included a mass of old newspapers, mattresses, chairs, boxes, a sewing machine, a wine press, and a bunch of other things that Langley had put in front of the door. And while crews were working to tear out the trash and clean up the place, a policeman climbed up to the second story and broke through a window. Although he was able to get inside, though, the officer had to climb over more newspapers, bunch of boxes, a baby carriage, a rake, and a bunch of like old umbrellas that people had tossed out. After 5 hours of searching, crews finally found Homer's body in a pile of boxes and newspapers. After examination, it was determined that Homer had been dead for only about 10 hours when he was found, and the official cause of death was a combination of starvation and heart disease. Police then surmised that Langley had been the one that had actually phoned in the anonymous tip and had left the house before police arrived. Rumors then started circulating that Langley had been spotted on a bus to Atlantic City, which then sparked a manhunt in New Jersey and 9 other states because apparently creepy old men can really cover some distance at this point. Meanwhile, police continued to clean out the piles upon piles of junk from the Collyer's house, which included a bunch of like outdated phone books, a Steinway piano, an X-ray machine, bowling balls, dressmaking dummies, jars of pickled human organs. What? They also found 8 live cats. I don't know how many dead cats they found, but they found 8 that were alive, a wide range of orchestral instruments, and a horse's jawbone. Like, where is he? Where did they get all of this stuff? I have no idea. In all, approximately 120 tons of trash were cleared from this house. And then on April 8th, how long? Like 2 weeks or more after the police initially went in, a workman stumbled across Langley's body, which had actually only been about 10 feet from where Homer had originally been discovered. Langley was found inside a 2-foot wide tunnel that he had created with rusty bed springs and wood from a chest of drawers. And basically what happened, the decomposing smell reported by the anonymous tip had actually been coming from Langley's body because coroners found that he had actually been dead for over a month and had already started to get eaten by the rats that were inside the house. Police came to believe that Langley died after crawling through the tunnel to bring food to Homer when he accidentally tripped one of his own booby traps, which then brought down possibly a literal ton of garbage and caused the tunnel to collapse on top of him, and he was just stuck and he died. So yeah, just don't be a hoarder is the moral of that story. Our final one here is of the Citizens Commission to Investigate the FBI, which was a liberal activist group in the 1970s who felt like the FBI was doing a lot of illegal stuff to infringe on everybody's First Amendment rights. And I don't know that they were necessarily wrong about that. Unlike most activist groups, though, who just kind of spew a bunch of nonsense with no real tangible proof, the commission took the high road and decided that they actually needed to obtain proof that the FBI was no good. And so with that in mind, they started making plans to break into an FBI office in the Philadelphia suburb of Medea. I don't know. As the group cased the office, they noticed that there wasn't actually a padlock on the door. But they tried to pick the door lock with a coat hanger. That didn't work. And then they couldn't figure out how to get in. So one of the activists just placed a note on the door saying, "Please don't lock this door tonight." And then the following day, a security guard just left it unlocked. I don't know if he thought that the FBI director asked him to do it or what, but yeah, that literally just worked. So if you want to break into a high security building, maybe try the sticky note method. Just say, "Hey, please don't lock this door tonight," and then come back and the security guard may not be there and he may have unlocked it. So the activists could not believe their luck. They walked right in and stole a ton of documents, a ton of really very sensitive information. They then mailed all of their findings to the Washington Post, which included surveillance on the civil rights movement and deceptive tactics to silence, various protesters. The biggest piece of information that they found regarded COINTELPRO, which was this FBI plan to actually infiltrate activist groups and disrupt their peaceful demonstrations. The stolen documents even uncovered letters to Martin Luther King Jr. The FBI had actually uncovered King's extramarital affair and planned to blackmail him with hopes that he would commit suicide. One of the notes read, quote, "King, there is only one thing left for you to do. You know what it is," which is insane. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, upon hearing of the theft of these documents, absolutely lost his mind and sent 200 agents after the thieves and to try to take this commission out, but no one was ever arrested. In 2014, over 40 years after the heist, members of the group came forward and revealed themselves because the statute of limitations on federal crimes had expired. But they had done their job, and that's why there's a lot of the conspiracies that exist around MLK and the CIA and the FBI, where it's like the government had a big hand in trying to take MLK out, and it's because of the Citizens Commission to investigate the FBI. All right, weird fun bag number 8 in the books. Again, like nothing super crazy this week, but still just, I think 3 very interesting stories from different periods in history that like you just never would have known about. And so I feel like I'm doing you a service that you didn't ask for, nor will you really fully appreciate, but that's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Really, it's fine. I just appreciate that you're here and that you're listening. So let's just see what we learned today.
What did we learn?
Number 1, the Sultana, the biggest maritime disaster in U.S. history. As many as 1,500 people died when the steamship they were on exploded because the captain was trying to get that payday from the government. Number 2, the Collyer Brothers, possibly the first, but definitely one of the biggest hoarders ever. Just 120 tons of trash. So listen, if you've got a lot of junk in your house right now, get rid of it. All right. Don't make police sift through all that junk to get to your dead body one day. Just make it easy for them. And number 3, the Citizens Commission to investigate the FBI uncovered documents that the FBI was going to blackmail Martin Luther King Jr. and try to get him to kill himself because equal rights are silly, I guess. Next week on Our Weird World, it's just going to be a real bummer of an episode, if I'm being honest. 2 stories of some kids who did not really have a good life. We are looking at the stories of Joseph Hall and Candace Newmaker. Yeah, man, just going to be a couple of real bummer stories that we got to power through it. All right. Not every episode can be happy and super, whoa, that's crazy. Like there's going to be some bummers here and there, and next week's going to be one of them. So we'll get through it together as we always do. So thank you for listening. Keep telling all your friends and keep it weird. Might actually get a lot of hate for this one. Well, I was raised up beneath the shade of a Georgia pine, and that's home, you know. Sweet tea, pecan pie, and homemade wine where the peaches grow. And my house, it's not much to talk about, but it's filled with love that's grown in southern ground. Well, it's funny how it's the little things in life that mean the most. Not where you live or what you drive or the price tag on your clothes. There's no dollar sign on a peace of mind, this I've come to know. So if you agree, have a drink with me. Raise your glasses for a toast to a little bit of chicken fried, a cold beer on a Friday night, a pair of jeans that fit just right, and the radio up. Well, I've seen the sunrise, see the love in my woman's eyes, feel the touch of a precious child, and know a mother's love. I thank God for my life and for the stars and stripes. May freedom forever fly. Let it ring. Salute the ones who died, the ones that give their lives so we don't have to sacrifice all the things we love, like our chicken fried.